Greetings, welcome. Thanks for joining me. It's Christian of Standing Stones Healing. And should Reiki be regulated? Should Reiki be regulated? What do you think? In this video, I'm sharing 3 pros and 3 cons of Reiki regulation. But first, it's Christian, yes indeed, of Standing Stones Healing, founder of the Reiki Business Collective, host of the Build Your Reiki Business podcast, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But a big question in our blessed Reiki community is, should Reiki be regulated? Now, I have a recent Build Your Reiki Business podcast episode all about it, but in this video, I'm sharing 3 pros and 3 cons of Reiki regulation. So, no matter what you believe about Reiki regulation, should it be or should it not be regulated? One big pro of regulating Reiki is that it will bring more trust to the practice of Reiki. It will make Reiki be more professional. And so regulation would indeed help Reiki to be seen as a more professional practice, and it would help Reiki to be taken more seriously. It would help Reiki to be more widely accepted. It would help Reiki to even be accepted by insurance. Now, of course, when I talk about Reiki regulation, I'm talking about US based Reiki businesses, US based Reiki, because there are countries where there is regulation of Reiki, but here in the United States, Reiki is largely unregulated. Now, I say largely because we know that regulation is in place in places like Florida, for instance. And so with this video, I want to make sure to have a big disclaimer to always check with your own state and local laws and regulations regarding Reiki practice. But by and large, Reiki is unregulated, which means that a pro of Reiki regulation is indeed making Reiki more accepted and making it something that is more widely known and even more widely accepted. So that is a big pro of regulating Reiki. Another big pro is the standardization of Reiki. You know, we love Reiki, and Reiki is wonderful and powerful, and we also have to admit that there is no standardization of teaching or practice. That means that many Reiki practitioners can practice in many different ways. And so each practitioner has our own way of practicing, which means that one practitioner could conduct a session in one particular way, and another one could practice in a completely different way. One teacher can teach one thing in Reiki, level 1, 2, or 3, and then another teacher can teach widely different things because there's no standardization. And regulation would create standardization, or at least some form of standardization, of teachings and of practice. Now, there are pros and cons with this as well, but for the sake of this video and the discussion, I think that it could be seen as a pro to have standardization, because then clients and students would know that they are going to be getting the same similar kind of teachings or service across different providers and classes. Now, again, there are pros and cons about that, but I think that when we have an industry like Reiki that has so many different ways of teaching and practicing, that standardization can indeed be helpful. A third pro of regulating Reiki is reducing scammers. Scammers are in every industry. And even though Reiki is high vibe and love and light, there are scammers in Reiki too. And regulating Reiki would decrease the scammers. Now, of course, there are a lot more legit practitioners out there than there are scammers. And like I said, there are scams in every single industry, even regulated industries. And so regulation is not going to eliminate scams in Reiki, but it would really help with that. And one of the ways it would help with that is that standardization of teaching and practice so that clients can feel confident in whomever they go to get a session from or to learn from, that at the very least there's going to be some standardization and the reduction of the chance of being scammed, because of course we do not want clients and students to get scammed. Now, along with the pros of regulation, there are cons too. To me, the number one con of regulating Reiki is the cost. The cost is a big issue, I believe, because anytime we have regulation, there's going to be a cost associated with that. The practitioner has to pay to have a license, for instance, and maybe they've got to pay every year to keep that license. So there are upfront fees, there are annual fees. These fees can get pretty hefty. There may be fees for licensing, added fees for training. Fees for training, the cost of courses may indeed become more expensive because practitioners and teachers have to pay to be licensed. And so regulation can indeed mean that we have to pay to be licensed and to be approved providers. And I'm not a big fan of paying additional fees. Probably you aren't either, but I think that the addition of fees would create unnecessary barriers for people getting into practicing Reiki and teaching Reiki. And I don't know about you, but I think we need more Reiki rather than less Reiki. And so I believe that the cost is a huge con to regulation. The second con to regulation is unnecessary requirements. And so if we have regulated Reiki, we may very well have unnecessary requirements that we have to do in order to become practitioners and teachers. So we might have to take unnecessary classes, things like anatomy and physiology, which, sure, they can be helpful because it's just helpful to know things like our own human anatomy, right? But are they necessary to be a Reiki practitioner? They're not. Let's admit that. And so unnecessary requirements can be a barrier and unhelpful as well. They indeed are a con to regulating Reiki. Now, a third con to regulating Reiki is indeed the question of who does the regulating. So who is in charge of regulating Reiki? And is this some outside organization that doesn't even understand Reiki anyway? Is this going to be a group of people who don't like Reiki to begin with or don't understand it to begin with? So the third con is that there is a small group of people who are going to dictate and regulate Reiki and determine what regulation looks like for thousands, millions of Reiki practitioners. And so when we have regulation, we have a small group of people who are setting the rules and the standards for a lot of people who usually don't have a say in the process. So to me, that's also a big con of regulation. Just simply the question of who does the regulating and who is the one who determines what the regulations are, and is that really fair to have a small group of people who may not even really understand Reiki, regulating Reiki for thousands, millions of Reiki practitioners? I personally don't think that's fair. So, do you think Reiki should be regulated? Should Reiki be regulated? Drop it down below in the comments. Let us know what you think. What are your thoughts? The link to tune into that recent Build Your Reiki Business podcast episode on regulation is down below. Tune in for more information, more thoughts on Reiki regulation. Well, whether Reiki is regulated or not, of course, I'm sending lots of blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business.